video.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see.
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Hi there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. My name is Brian Hyde. Twice a week, I sit down and help those who are interested in truth find their way through the smokescreen and the fog and the deception being served up by much of our corporate media, in conjunction with various political opportunists and power seekers doing their best to hoodwink you that they only want to help you. Today, we're going to be talking about how none dare call it abnormal. And you're going to see what this applies to very quickly. But let's start with what has to be the scariest headline, the most hysterical headline of 2023. And yes, of course, the Oscar goes to, it's the Idaho Statesman. Look at this headline. Not trying to put any fear in anybody, but what if a losing U.S. presidential candidate tries to take power by force? Oh, well, it's funny that they would pick a party founded or an organization founded by Democrats and very much against the Civil Rights Act, like the Democrats were back in the 60s, and would use that as their imagery. Actually, I think Brian Lenny not only called out the Statesman for their drunk tweeting, but he also asked, didn't Joe Biden already do this? Take an election by force? Is that not why they're still hunting down and trying to put people in jail over questioning the 2020 election results and protesting at the Capitol, in some cases by simply walking around inside the building, not hurting people, not breaking things, not stealing things, not overthrowing the government? Just kind of a curious thing. But wow, the Statesman is determined to start planting those seeds. I like John Grubb's take on it too. Breaking, the Idaho Statesman questions the integrity of the 2020 election, posts photos of Democrats taking power by force. Look, it's not like there's just no place in this world for questions when it comes to the 2020 election. I mean, come on. What kind of ingratitude would that take? And I just want to remind you, it's the behavior of the people who are saying there was nothing wrong with that election. Everything was absolutely above board. Those of us who remember what they were looking like and what they were acting like as Trump ran for office in 2016, won the presidency, and then was president for 4 years, their behavior left, shall we say, something to be desired in terms of being rational, self-control, able to make sense of what they were doing. But no, they lied, they cheated, they created out of thin air scandals and impeached the guy twice, and still a very strong voting bloc in America would put him back in office. Some of us would vote for him, not so much because we're Trump supporters, but simply because the alternative is so repulsive and so detached from reality, you really don't have much choice. Now, I do appreciate the way that not Kenny Rogers put it in this tweet. Okay, fine. The Bidens actually did take $17 million in bribes, and the DOJ covered it up. Robert Kennedy Jr. was censored at a hearing on censoring, and the Dems are trying to throw the leading GOP candidate in prison. But don't you dare tell me these people would ever rig an election. He makes his point well, but sometimes I wonder if a little backhand across the face might just drive the point home so they could think about it. Now, you have to understand, though, that a lot of Democrats are feeling very encouraged looking at the elections. While none of the red flood or the red waves, have come to pass as far as since the 2020 election, it doesn't really look like red voters are making a lot of gains. And it's true. For the people who show up, it does appear that, the blue states and the blue state voters are carrying the day. So when you see a headline like this, Idaho Democratic Party across the country, voters turn out for abortion rights. Now, it may, or I'm sure some of them did. I'm absolutely positive that some did. That doesn't mean that all did, but look at this. Abortion rights have won in every election where they were on the ballot since Roe v. Wade was overturned. Okay, it's very possible that's the case. And given the activist nature of the left wing, I would say it's more based upon the activist nature and the willingness to, wink, wink, bend the rules if they have to get things done, than simply, a lot of people saw the light and went, you're right, we ought to be able to kill our children right up until birth, and changed their hearts and voted that way. Isn't it interesting, though? That's a very extreme point of view, the one about, killing innocent babies for any reason whatsoever, but especially because this is inconvenient. Damn it, I'm a busy person and I don't have time to raise a kid like this. That's extreme. to normal people, to the normies out here, we don't think that way. Now, it's not that we wouldn't see, you know, get a positive pregnancy test and be like, oh, crap, we're adding another kid. We just outgrew our car or something like that. It has happened to many of us on the conservative side of the aisle, but you deal with it. And above all, you don't put life at a lower priority because, well, this is going to impact our bottom line, honey. I think the best thing we can do is terminate this pregnancy. You know, but of course, it's always dressed up with stories of, oh, but it's, you know, the life and the health of the mother. No, the majority of abortions in this country are convenience. And Idaho has a pretty tough abortion law. Having convenience abortions is not as easy in Idaho as it is elsewhere. But boy, the left wing in Idaho is working hard and with the help of the press to convince us that, you know, ever since this went into being, ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, actually it was even before, they say infant and women mortality is rising. I may talk about this in the next episode. But there's no cause given. Well, look at the numbers for 2019 versus 2021. You know, the only thing I can think of that really happened, you know, different between 2019 and 2021 was a whole lot of people were convinced to take an experimental therapeutic. I'm avoiding a certain word for a very good reason. And those who took it, well, let's just say that sometimes there were some unintended consequences and side effects. And this is true in adults as well as in kids. So I don't know the answers. Is it true that women and infant mortality is up in Idaho? You know, the Idaho Capital Sun, among others, is saying, yes, it is. But as far as they're guessing, they're saying, well, it's because the abortion laws are so strict. Swing and a miss. Try again. You're going to have to do better if you want to convince us. Now, I do appreciate Matt Edwards making this observation. Never forget that Democrats want abortion on demand all the way to just before birth. They will lie. They'll give you all sorts of caveats, but there will never be one Democrat who will fight to save the lives of innocent preborn. And that's what extremism is. Sick. It used to be that standing up for the innocent life that was at stake was not considered an extreme point of view. It may not be something that everybody agreed with, but to stand up for life was actually a pretty normal attitude. And what most people would do, people with a conscience. Somehow we've lost our way, or a lot of moral compasses have become uncalibrated and maybe even non-functional. But speaking of extremism, let's take a look at where this extremism leads and how normal behavior is portrayed in a very different way. I want you to look at the article here. This is from the Idaho or East Idaho News, republishing an article from Idaho Capital Sun. They were called out by the Idaho Tribune, who shared this tweet. The city of Pocatello is honoring local drag queens for their work providing, see the quotes, educational spaces for children amid community backlash. Now, I'm not the only one who noticed this. In fact, it was Lucas Kaler who pointed out, well, at least they put educational spaces for children in quotes. That was actually an appropriate use of, well, you know, this is what they call it, but really, here's what they're doing. So I want to share a few excerpts with you from this article that was published in East Idaho News. It originated with Mia Maldonado in the Idaho Capital Sun. Pocatello honors drag reading group with Human and Civil Rights Award. Oh no, the press isn't engaging in any kind of advocacy here, but pay close attention to how they portray the normies who aren't so keen on kids being exposed to this kind of stuff versus those wonderful performers who are just providing educational space. Gag. All right. A drag reading group received this year's Human and Civil Rights Award from the City of Pocatello's Human Relations Advisory Committee. Why does city government even have such an Orwellian-sounding agency, you know, in its employ? For its work providing educational spaces for children amid community backlash. I notice it's missing here the quotation marks, educational spaces. How normal, how reasonable for these drag queens to provide performances for children amid community backlash. In other words, if someone says, is this appropriate? That's backlash. The city's Human Relations Advisory Committee consists of community members that address local civil rights issues and advise the mayor or city council on civil rights concerns. There's another way to put this. Community members who are willing to act as activists or advocates for various left-wing agendas. Each year, the committee recognizes an individual or group that has worked to improve civil rights issues in Pocatello. Previous winners include educators, coaches, behavioral health advocates, among others. Well, let's put some perverts in there and see what happens. I mean, it couldn't be a bad thing, right? It's for the kids. This year, Reading Time with Queens, a nonprofit whose mission is to have drag performers read stories that teach acceptance and self-love. Again, they're using some really nice, warm, fluffy euphemisms for perversion and deviancy. They're the ones who received the award. Each month, the nonprofit organizes a 45-minute program where drag artists read picture books, sing songs, teach sign language, and create crafts with children and family in Pocatello and Idaho Falls. Did we mention they're all dressed in lingerie or they're men dressing as women and behaving in outrageously sexual ways? Oh, because that's part of the story too, but for some reason, Mia Maldonado did not want to mention that. According to Pocatello's city website, the committee strives to improve relations among all members of the community, regardless of their race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, creed, sex, age, marital or familial status, physical or mental disability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, blah, 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 anything to step away from reality. Notice how many ways they divide people up as opposed to just recognizing that we're all human beings with the same natural rights, at least when it comes to how government should be treating us, and being good with that. No, we got to divide them up into little groups, and this group has more rights than that group because they've been oppressed, and your group has been an oppressor, so you must be punished and have some rights taken away. I'm sorry, but this is Marxism. Soft Marxism, to be sure. But it's that classic Marxist, the oppressed versus the oppressors at work, only this time kids are the target audience. Gee, I wonder why they would want to aim this at kids. Now, the reading group previously hosted its events at the Marshall Public Library in Pocatello, but after receiving protesters from mass resistance, an national anti-LGBT plus group, the nonprofit had to move its programs to different private venues out of safety concerns. There's that victim. We were concerned for our safety. Why? Well, because religious protesters arrived early to a reading time event in February, and they took up all the available seats in the library room, preventing parents and children who came to the event from entering the space. I think it was a pretty clever and very non-confrontational, non-violent way to register their disapproval. Is it the thing that I would recommend you do in every situation? Not necessarily. But it worked, at least in that case. But, well, now we have concerns about safety. Why? Because someone disagrees with us. Rowan Smith, a board member of the nonprofit, told the Idaho Capital Sun, that while he's grateful for the award, it feels surreal since the success of the program has come at the expense of its board members worrying for their safety. He's waving the victim flag again. Hey, remember, we're victims. We need government to enforce our point of view on everybody else so that we can feel safe. They're never going to feel safe until every person has bent their knee and kissed the ring of this particular type of advocacy. Smith said, we were really fortunate to be in a community where we have had magnitudes more support than we've had adversity. We put in so much for every program to pull this off, and it's all volunteers. It's all people who just choose to come and spend their time with us. True, that may be. But again, is this appropriate for kids? Because that's really the question that needs to be asked. Jody Dunn, known as Mr. Buster at Reading Time events, is the treasurer of the group. In a phone interview, he said the program has evolved from being once in a while into a monthly nonprofit program. He says Reading Time is a very creative way for a group of diverse individuals to read stories, sing songs, learn sign language, and do crafts with children of elementary school age or younger children. Hey, very laudable that they're willing to do this, but why don't they do this kind of stuff at old folks' homes? I'm just curious, why don't they want an adult audience? Seems strange. If they were really interested in, reaching to the community generally. I wonder why they want those kids. It's almost like they're trying to plant seeds or something. Dunn said that even though the nonprofit primarily consists of drag artists, its programs draw inspiration from diverse communities. Here's another shield. Listen to some of the diverse communities we have. This is particularly evident because the board includes individuals from the Jewish and deaf communities, just in case you were thinking of criticizing them for any reason. He says, Reading Time is a great way for children to see adults be creative and funny and goofy. We read books to showcase the diversity of people that you could interact with. A big part of this program is talking about inclusivity, self-love, and self-care. Oh, so many wonderful euphemisms, and behind every one of them, there is a sexual performance that's going on, or a sexualized performance, and that's somehow left out of the story. And again, why is the target audience children? Always children. Without exception, it's kids. I mean, look, I want to ascribe noble intentions to what they're doing. But I think this next part really spells out why it's happening. Dunn, a transgender man, said that before transitioning, he thought drag would be the only way he could express himself as a masculine individual. The trans community wasn't really spoken about in the early 2000s, and there just wasn't enough language for the trans community in medical and professional work, meaning they hadn't been co-opted yet by the hardcore left. Drag allowed me to dive into my own gender identity and really understand what I was going through internally. It also allows for the normalizing of mental illness, especially being able to introduce it to young children as this is a perfectly normal and good thing, and you should consider being a part of it. Do you see the problem here? Look, I say this with compassion for those who struggle with whatever form of mental illness. You don't deserve to be, marginalized, hated, persecuted, beaten, imprisoned. But there are some things that you really need to keep to yourself and some things that you really need to work out in private. And the last thing you need to do is double down and take it to children and present it to them as this, hey, this is such a good thing. You should maybe be a part of it too. Oh, I can't believe that people would push back against that kind of thing. Anyway, Matt Edwards calls it out perfectly. This is the narrative the legacy press is so good at spinning. Drag queen story hour is just providing educational spaces while regular people react with backlash. Your press hates your families. I think another way to put it is they hate what is normal. And, we'll talk a little bit about what is normal and some of the things that are worth standing up for. But there's always this vibe whenever you hear about drag queen story hour. It's the wolf with makeup. I just want to read some books to your chickens. Yeah, there's nothing predatory going on here, but we really want to talk to the kids, especially the really young kids. I'm sorry. That's just the place for normal adults, rational people to put their foot down and say no. And it starts with, first of all, don't patronize and don't attend those events. Don't publicize when and where they're going to be. But above all, be willing to stand up, even if it means you're going to be called names, even if it means you're going to be marginalized somewhat and considered extreme for holding to the norms. Do you want to see what some of those norms look like? Got a great illustration of this. These are the things a man needs in order to be happy. Just 4 things. You need a family. You need fitness, wisdom, and above all, you need freedom. Now, I ask you, do the people on the left stand for any of those things? Some might, but generally speaking, family is anathema to the left. Why? Well, Marx, I think, was one of the most open proponents of we need to abolish the family. It's one of the most common forms of oppression that we see. So, under communism, under real Marxism, family does not have a place. Everybody is a little individual that is subsumed into this collective mass, and basically everything you do and everything you think has to be in harmony with the mass. Not good. They don't promote health. They promote, the use of drugs and lifestyles. I'm sorry to say this, but medically, the LGBTQ plus lifestyle and the practitioners, people who engage in same-sex sex, have a very, very high instance of medical consequences that happen when you violate the natural ecology of the human body. It's just, this is a fact. I'm not trying to be hateful to them. I'm saying that generally, we'll just take homosexual men, for instance. Their lifespan is greatly shortened compared to heterosexual men, and it's because of the risks that they're putting themselves at. If a person was put at risk because they were consuming alcohol, and yes, alcohol it can shorten your life by half, would you encourage people by saying, hey, you were just born this way, man? It's in your genes, man. It's in your DNA. You have to embrace this. Here, have a drink, have a bottle. Of course not. And you certainly wouldn't be taking that in front of kids and telling them this is what you need to do. So if freedom is important, and this means freedom even for people to be wrong, albeit if they're going to be wrong, it's probably best if they keep their vices, their mistakes, in the privacy of their own bedroom. That's why there wasn't a whole lot of talk and a lot of language and science and education about trans issues, prior to just the last few years. There was a certain thing called decency, and there was a thing called privacy, and even manners. And I hate to say this, I'm not trying to make any individual person feel bad, but generally speaking, what you do for your sexual satisfaction in no way improves everybody else's lives when you go out there and trumpet it to the world. It's your business, and you should probably keep it that way. Now, if you are interested in maintaining your freedom, one thing you're going to have to understand is how does the legislative process and the political process work in our state. And so I want you to put a couple of dates on your calendar. The Idaho Freedom Foundation is going to be offering their Legislature 101 course coming up on January 3rd and January 4th. So you can mark your calendar for this. I would recommend go to idahofreedom.org. I attended this course in Twin Falls here, I think about a year ago. Marvelous information, if nothing else, just to teach you a little bit about how the process works, not just so much, the basic civics of, okay, well, this is how a bill becomes law, but all the different committees that it has to work through, all the different places where the citizens' influence can be felt to help legislators understand and further those bills that support sound principles and to reject those that don't. So again, idahofreedom.org if you would like to find out more about the legislative session, the Legislature 101 course that's coming up. It would be well worth your time. Look, you can be a citizen lobbyist, so to speak, and I'm not saying that like it's a dirty word, but if you can be a citizen lobbyist, if your lawmakers, your representatives, your state senator know you by name, that's a good thing. But most of us, if we're not really actively engaged, we're really in the dark about how that process takes place. So here's your chance to learn. It isn't going to cost you anything but a little bit of time. You will come away very well compensated in terms of knowledge and wisdom. And you'll also find some really great people to work with, people who share the same standards that you do. So you don't have to feel alone, isolated, abnormal, since that's the word we're not allowed to say. None dare call it abnormal, except those who are willing to speak the truth and hold the principles even when it's uncomfortable. You and I need to be that kind of person. I'm Brian Hyde. This is Nowhere to Hide.
Are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.